Hey everybody, this is Justin Case from American Newscape. We're joining our friend Scott Dudley for American Consciousness. Hello, Scott. Welcome back to American Newscape.
Well, it's good to be here. Thanks, Justin. Good to hear from you again. And for all of our listeners, welcome back, welcome aboard. And based on today's topic, I just want to point out that these shows won't go on forever. Each of these shows is totally precious, and it's such a finite resource that you may be hearing the last show today or any day.
Well, you
And
might.
and and it's just really important to keep that in mind and subscribe.
You might be able to say you were the last subscriber of the show that's no mas.
Would that would be that would be so cool.
Okay, Scott, take us through it. Walk us through
All right.
it.
So we're going to talk about an interesting topic, and the reason it's interesting is because to me is because every filter that you put on it, every situation that you look at it, there's like an application. And when something's kind of universal, it's like, okay, this is probably something that I can learn something about and apply it to my own life. And so the thing we're going to talk about today is called scarcity bias. And I got interested in scarcity bias through, not through the dog park, although it happened there, but through the cats. Um, if like, so I feed feral cats. Guilty as charged. And if I take out like tomorrow morning, if I roll out there with 4 or 5 cans of cat food, like the good stuff, not like the cheap stuff, the good stuff, and I pile those cat food bowls full of really good, high quality, massive amounts of cat food. I'll come back the next day, and there will be dried up, massive amounts of really high quality cat food. And I'm like, what? So I'm like, well, they certainly don't need 5 cans of this stuff. So I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to bring out 1 can. So I brought out 1 can, and they saw me. They're kind of looking from their 20, 30 feet away because they're feral cats. They don't really like me. But they're looking, and I got 1 can. I split it in half between like the two primary bowls. And I came out like 15 minutes later, and it was empty. And I'm like, there's something going on here. There were 5 cans, and they just ignored it. And 1 can, and all of a sudden it's gone. What is up with that behavior? So I also have another cat story. I got like a $3.99 dollar store bed. Right? It's like I was impulse spending. It was just me, blowing up the account. $3.99. Brought it home. All the cats indoors fought over it. It was like the biggest dispute of our lives. Everybody wanted that bed. And so the bullies would push the other ones out. The other ones would try to get there first so that they wouldn't get pushed out. And I'm like, oh, I've created a monster. So I went back and with my, never-ending flow of cash, I bought 3 more.
Wow.
Yeah, right. It's like $12. And I thought, well, okay, this will solve the problem. And it did solve the problem. So now I've got 4 cat beds, and I kind of spaced them out and tried various configurations. Nobody wanted them anymore. They were like ignored.
Even the initial bed is ignored.
But I noticed. Yeah, absolutely. But I noticed it, and I paid attention to it. I said, you know what? Something's going on here. There's a behavioral phenomenon going on. And ultimately I started looking around, and it's called scarcity bias.
Okay. Okay.
I do you do this?
Well,
Were
I
you
don't.
the were you the jerk who bought the last 4 rolls of toilet paper in 2020?
No, I
You were
didn't.
it, huh?
No, I didn't because I sensed there was going to be a problem and stocked up. And lo and behold, I went to Home Depot to get toilet paper, and they had plenty. Um, but toilet paper is a very precious commodity to me.
We're sponsored by Crohn's disease.
Yeah. So no, it's an interesting theory. It's kind of it throws a real chink in the armor of supply and demand, but it's lack of supply
It's
creates
lack
demand.
of supply, exactly. And if you can create the impression of lack of supply, then you can rig the system a little bit in your favor. Everybody gets excited, like, oh, it's running out. I better
Well,
get mine.
it's the old anybody that's dabbled in the commodities market has that one story where all the reports came out that the beet crop in Russia was going to be destroyed. That way, sugar was going to go through the roof, and it certainly set off the market. And there was just a huge demand for sugar commodities. And lo and behold, 3 months later, Russia had a record beet crop. But all those
Well, of course, the bottom falls out of the market if that happens.
right, and the only people that got fat off of that deal were the brokers, the commodity brokers.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
they're always, that's what puts private equity. It's not like public equity; it's private equity, which means if they're buying on the dip and selling on the rise, then they're pocketing whatever happens there.
well, absolutely, and that's where smoke and mirrors came from.
Yeah.
I'm going to paint you
So
a
so
story, but
yeah.
the cats are bringing integrity to this. They have an honest approach, and I would love to know what they're actually thinking.
And when I saw cats doing this, I thought right away, I'm like, okay, well, let's see if there's a dog version. And we have a term in the dog park called resource guarding. And with dogs, resource guarding essentially is if if they believe the commodity is in short supply and limited and valuable to them, they'll get grouchy, they'll growl, they'll snap, they'll even fight to protect that commodity. And that could be, if heaven forbid, a dog in heat shows up at the dog park and there's unfixed males, and there's a clear example. But there's a dog at the dog park who loves his owner. And so if anybody gets within, say, 6, 8 feet of that owner, they get barked at. And it's because he's a jealous old dude. He really does love his owner, and he's guarding her, and he's resource guarding her. He views her as she's the treat lady, she's the pet lady, she's the give me a ride, she's the Starbucks pup cup lady for him,
Right.
and he views all of that intrusion as a potential threat.
Well, people need to recognize that in a pet's world, you are the most important aspect of their life. Period. Even
Well,
cats.
definitely with dogs. I'm gonna say with cats, it's
They just have.
there's a quality of service issue with cats for sure.
That's true. That's true. My cat, once you give him something, he takes possession of it and he recognizes that it's his. He's not defensive about it, but it's his. He'll rat hole it away, or if you don't give it to him, he doesn't show that behavior.
Nice. My dogs tend to we tend to get to the dog park before anybody else in the morning, and my herding dog will take an inventory of all the old used balls in the park, and she does that in kind of like, let me check and see where all of my old used balls ended up, and you can just see her kind of developing an ownership kind of feel for it. And if it's a really good ball, she'll take it home.
Well, who could blame her? When we think about dogs and their bones, only a dog knows where he buried his bone, but some
I've
dogs
got
will.
18 balls on the backseat floor of my car. It really isn't necessary.
Well, who knows? She's storing them for the winter. Of course, the
Yeah,
winter's
yeah,
past. Maybe she'll
yeah,
take.
something like that. Something like that. And she's not even wild about fetching, to be honest.
Yeah, I never had a dog that was wild about fetching. I would get that look like, if you want that ball, why don't you just hang on to it?
Well, no, this is so it's interesting with Remy because she does fetch, and it's funny because she's kind of spooky around other dogs. So if there's a bunch of dogs chasing stuff, she won't chase. But if it's just her and it's just me, she'll chase, she'll catch, she'll grab, and then the game changes. Now it's keep away. And
Okay.
so she's resource guarding her ball and kind of daring me or any other dog to take it away. And she's really good about like, I'm going to knock it like 6 feet away from me. And the minute you think you can get it, I'm going to magically explode and go get it and laugh at you because you didn't get it.
Well, maybe, or she's just saying, "We're done playing this game."
Yeah, no, her game's keep away. She
Okay.
that's where she gets her jollies for sure. So scarcity bias, dogs, cats. So the minute I saw dogs doing it too, and then I would talk about it at the dog park. Like, do you ever see your dogs, you know, noticing that something appears scarce and then really working towards getting it? And they're like, yeah, it happens all the time. So I'm like, okay, must be us too, right? I mean, we're somewhere in between dogs and cats, and so people probably do this. And sure enough,
Okay.
we are scarcity bias triggers us. And I threw out the toilet paper storage, just as a fun example. Now that we've survived, um, because it was exactly what was happening. There was a limited commodity, and everybody began to like fill their closets full of this limited commodity, and then it really got scarce, legit.
Well, it did, but did it really get scarce, or were we just fooled into
I
believing
just
it was
didn't
scarce?
know the people with the right closets.
I have to believe there was a supply out there that they were just not telling us about.
Yeah, no, I was going to my local restaurants and bumming napkins.
Wow, Scott. Well, you had a passion for toilet paper too, and I think Americans do have a passion for toilet paper.
Oh, absolutely. So the first thing that people do when they get a sense of scarcity is they hoard. So oh, you know what? And I'll throw out some of my favorite grocery stores. Big Lots, which is now closed, Grocery Outlet, and even Aldi. All of these fine manufacturers, who I'm sure will be sending us all sorts of sponsorship offers based on me slamming them, um, have special things that come and don't stay.
Right.
And so if you go to the store and there's like three awesome, obscure Wisconsin cheeses, and you tried the cheese last week and it's delicious, and there's only three, you're going to scarf up all three of those bad boys because you don't know when it's ever going to come back again.
That's true.
And you don't want to miss out.
Well, even the dollar store plays that game. They'll bring in a pallet of something, and that'll be the last time you'll ever see it.
Yeah. If it takes you 2 weeks to like it, then you may never see it again. You go back like, oh, this is really, really good. And you go back and it's gone.
Well, that's where that retail expression "until supplies last," as supplies last.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was talking to one of the guys at the dog park, And the first thing he said, he turned it right into relationships. And he said, yeah, settling. So when we're selecting our life partners or our dates for the prom or our dates for Saturday night or whatever, there's a pool, if you will, of potential partners, dates, people to hang out with. And our judgment of that pool becomes one of those interesting things that can lead to scarcity bias. And if we think that pool's drying up, then we get while the getting's good. And for him, that really meant, like, many people settle. They'll get into marriages because they think, oh, you know what? I'm not sure that I'm ever going to get anybody else because all the good ones are taken. You and I didn't do that. Looking
Well,
over my shoulder.
I think he's trying to put that in the scarcity. I ain't buying that, but okay, okay.
Well, no, and so you avoided settling, which is good, and
Well,
and I feel like I did. But the idea that people could feel that their choices were running out and that they better get somebody to do their laundry and nag at them about other stuff quickly, or they wouldn't get that, and then they would die a spinster, or be one of those single guys in their 50s that people look at and say, why are you single in your 50s? And then all sorts of stories start. A lot of kind of negative judgments for people who fail to follow the natural progression of you know uh, partnering up.
this sounds like it should be an episode on conformity, but I don't know. Different time. I grew up in a different era, different time. And there were disco balls on the ceiling, and clubs were called meat markets.
I remember those times, and there was some transient quid pro quo kind of inner exchanges.
Well, there was, but very few people approached them as in desperation. They were just every time into a club, it was a new. You didn't know what was going to be on the smorgasbord, so to speak.
Now, this was pre herpes,
No, this
or
was
was it
during herpes.
pre HIV?
Yeah, certainly pre-HIV, and we were upset enough about herpes. I can't imagine had HIV hit that era. I think we would have just melted.
Herpes kind of slowed some of our rolls.
Yes, yes, they did. It did, and everybody was concerned, and that was topic of conversation. When HIV came around, there was so much misinformation, so much disbelief. It was almost, unless you knew somebody that was dying from that disease, you didn't believe it existed.
Yeah, I was kind of willfully blind with herpes as well. And even when it got to be like a really heavy topic of conversation amongst the singles. Um, and as it turns out, I was with, I'm trying to figure out the right way to say it so we don't get banned. Um, uh,
A
a
carrier,
few,
a
a,
carrier.
a carrier or two or three, and in each case, I somehow dodged the infection bullet. And so at the end of the day, I started almost feeling more bulletproof, and that was not a good thing either.
Well, I came out of that era without contracting it, them as well. Let's just say them, since it's plural. Herpes are plural. I almost felt that some people were susceptible to it, and some people came in contact with it and didn't acquire it.
The funny thing is, me and my running mates, we were already doing pronouns with herpes because we would do herpes and his peas and their peas, and
Yeah, well,
we were ahead of our time.
and I was saying things like herpes simplex 32.
Oh
for
yeah, yeah,
for
yeah.
whatever reason.
Well, and it's funny because it also reflects a scarcity bias because for those of us who were used to kind of the casual pickup sex of the 70s, mid 70s, late 70s, even early 80s, uh, it became a limitation of the pool because now you had to like be aware that this person may have that and it's something that you could catch and it would spoil your day when you were having an outbreak.
Well, absolutely. But, throughout our lifetimes and our ancestors' lifetimes, there was something out there that they could possibly be transmitted that might probably be deadly. Because even common STDs of today were
Oh yeah,
deadly
that's
back
very
then.
correct. Very syphilis would kill you.
Yeah.
It take a while. You get we viruses are really clever. And the whole idea is if I kill you too fast, I won't be able to spread.
Or I won't be able to enjoy you suffering and lingering.
So stuff with really fast mortality tends to not get too far out of control because people die before they can spread it too quickly. So something like syphilis, though, is like 40 years later, you get brain worms. You get secondary health problems related to carrying syphilis your whole life. But you spent 40 years out in the field, hanging out, being the party boy, whatever. And so you share it. And syphilis was happy. They owed you commission.
But okay, back to scarcity.
Absolutely. So you've got hoarding, you've got settling. And then the most common one, obviously, is buying or making goals of things that you don't need
True.
because you feel like it's limited, and that would be me with the 18 cheeses after the one cheese tasted good, and I know they'll never come back again. But one of our people at the dog park actually did their PhD dissertation um, on it wasn't it titled scarcity bias, but it was about part-time community college staff. So one of the tricks of community colleges is they hire these upper level people, PhD and master's people. I mean, these are le creme de la crop, and but they hire them to teach one or two classes in this part-time basis, and they don't get benefits, and they don't get office space, and they don't get all of the kind of accompaniments that come with full-time professorship. And it's like they get into it because there really isn't anything else available, and a part of them feels like this, I spent all this time and money on my education, and this is the I'd better settle. I'd better get this right now because there aren't any full-time college teaching jobs hanging out. Maybe if I'm a really good part-timer, they'll grab me and make me full-time. But that doesn't happen. It's super rare because colleges, like everywhere else in the world, are looking at their bottom line. And so, paying a full-time professor, health benefits, sick time, office space, the whole deal becomes a lot more expensive. And so, what community colleges have done is they've filled up their staff with all of these adjunct professors, and basically they're paid piecemeal. They're paid by the hour for their teaching time, not for their prep time or their grading time. And they don't have an office on the spot, and they have to do all their work from home, their class preparation, their lesson planning, stuff like that. And these people kind of got into it, and now that they're into it, they have to find a reason to live. It's like what validates you being being in this kind of like piecemeal, used, abused kind of situation. What validates you? What gets you going? Guess what? It wasn't the institutional administration.
No, it wasn't. And, in our region, Scott, people are brought in with their degrees, and they may end up teaching basket weaving, so to speak, which has nothing to do with their degree, and that job itself is an extreme elective, and it's just like a participation class of students to sit in, and I don't think there's any fulfillment in that type of work for most of those people. I think
Have you seen my baskets? I've got I've got some pretty awesome baskets.
well,
I didn't make.
but I think, yeah, and then I think a lot of it is they get to tell their mothers that they're professors at colleges.
But for 25 $30 an hour, and none of the prep time and none of the grading time, so it's an interesting settle. So, but you're absolutely right. Part of their reason for putting themselves in this kind of abusive position was professional acknowledgement.
Hmm.
So you could go around to the world and say, I'm a college professor. You could, walk into a crowded bar and they'd be like, hey, what do you do? Well, I'm a professor over at the college.
Well, yeah, you can go to the dog park and say that, and you can dust off your PhD, and but that's fine, you know. And Scott, you would make a great teacher at the college because you have such a broad background, but I don't think they'd let you teach what needs to be taught.
No, indeed, I was kind of kept on a pretty tight rein on those rare instances when I could sneak in there and do stuff. Uh, and it was fun. I enjoyed it. It would be okay. But that wasn't the so the other thing that really got these guys that put them in the position where they were willing to be, to me, I was reading the thing and going, you're abusing these people. This is just totally not fair. But they were okay with it in a way because of their students.
Right. A passion for them.
Well, and then I was like, you know what this sounds like? It sounds like I've got a really abusive partner and I'm staying in the relationship because of the kids.
Well, most teachers fall into that category.
And then at the end of the day, people could say, well, he did it for the kids, and you get kind of this badge of sacrificial honor. But you didn't have a living wage, and you had to struggle to make ends meet, and there wasn't any other jobs, and there was a lot of uncertainty from year to year whether you'd get a job with these people or you'd have to look around and find other piecemeal jobs. So it was like a really hard road.
Well,
And
Scott, in our
yeah,
county, I know that county executives, CEOs of the county, were actually teaching classes at the college.
oh yeah, yeah. A lot of county professional people were adjunct professors on the side. That's usually who I would have to who I would sub for occasionally. Uh,
But they weren't doing it for the money; they were doing it to be doing it.
well, it's a coin flip. Because there is some remuneration and there is some status associated with it, and some of it is giving back.
Right.
And you're right. A lot of I there were board of supervisor members who were still uh, teaching a couple of classes every term over at the community college, and that's kind of cool that they would do that. You
Well, for them, I would say it was all about the money.
know, that's that board of supervisor is not a high paying position.
Right, unless you're corrupt. You know, in most politics, it's not a high-paying position unless you're corrupt.
Yeah, yeah. Or unless you hit the right level. House of Reps makes $180,000 a year. They have to pay for their own housing in Washington, but as you suggested, a little corruption will pay the rent.
Yeah, but unlimited stamps.
There you go. Well, for the minute, I mean, we're rethinking the post office right now, so we'll see where this goes.
And a huge staff. So,
So we basic people basically have three kind of obvious ways in which they handle a perception, and that's the trick. As you mentioned with the toilet paper or the uh, some salad oil scandal or something. It's if people believe there's a shortage, if you believe that, oh my goodness, this is running out. Can you imagine if they said that we're down to our like last 10 bits of Wi-Fi or something?
Oh, I cannot. But yeah, I could take it easy for a while. That would be good.
Right?
Uh,
I put the
what
phone away.
It's just like the egg shortage we just went through. There's a lot of fingers pointing at why it happened, but the reality is a lot of laying hens were killed. They
Yeah,
were
yeah,
put to sleep
absolutely.
for a disease that in our state they were prepping for a vaccine.
Have you heard how they put him to sleep? It's kind of an interesting backstory.
I would hope in soup.
They right? No, you can't do that because if they are infected, then unless you boil the soup right, you could pass it along. So they didn't do that. They basically used fire extinguisher, the white foam stuff,
Hmm.
and they just filled up the room full of that, and then obviously everybody suffocated. And then they used like bulldozers, or other types of mass movement machines, and threw it all in the dirt.
Yeah, and they may have actually been ill, may have. But have we
No,
created?
that's the problem. If you have a potential outbreak, you have to treat it like a real one.
Well, it's you don't have to. It's kind of like the amoebas that show up in the waters in the western United States that occasionally will kill somebody, and they're basically transmitted by migratory birds. So
Right, right.
should we kill all the ducks and the geese because one of them might have an amoeba?
Yeah, you really can't do that. Or, it's more. Hey, you're a libertarian, so this works, right? Swim at your own risk.
Exactly. Amoebas got to
It,
eat just like worms.
well, and the odds of an amoeba getting you and killing you is extraordinarily small. But it,
Absolutely.
but it's a risk. But it's like getting hit by lightning or something. It's like, or right now it's bee season. So if you don't have in where we live, if you don't have a group of bees like resting on some place of your house while their little scouts are out looking for a better hive, you know, you're not cool.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
and so they're all over the place right now, and people are all on level 9 of their bee alerts. And like, you know what? Just leave them alone. They'll figure out where they have to go, and they'll go away. You don't have to call the vector control people.
Well, they won't do anything anyway. Vector control will not do anything to bees. And, the reality is all those swarms are Africanized bees, and
Yes.
they're resting and they're looking for their next home.
Yep. Yep.
And,
And it's really casual, and it's they're not going to attack you. They're guarding their queen. As long as you don't go in there and like do something really aggressive and not very smart, you'll be fine.
no, absolutely. And I'm allergic to bees, and, we had a swarm that showed up on our garage in a swarm pattern, which is a big circle. And I went, oh, I should be concerned about that, and called a friend of mine that's one of the major beekeepers. And he said, if you're really concerned, I'll come get them. He said, but why don't you call me in a couple days? He knew
Yeah,
they were
exactly.
going to be gone,
Yeah, exactly.
and they were. And
No,
then,
first time I had one, I had the similar kind of, oh my god, they're setting up shop here. I was fortunate enough to have a functioning hive in the wall of my garage, and they used a different entrance than I did. And so I was like, well, you guys are really not in my way, and I'm not in your way. We'll just let this happen. And it lasted about 6 years or so. And I would go into the garage to do stuff, and it was the building's humming.
yeah,
It's like just got this like low vibration healing frequency thing going on.
and it may have been healing. That may be why you're still here.
It may have been, and the funny thing was their entrance was in a spot in the alley where if people had bad intentions, it was kind of like an intrusion point. And so part of me was like, well, at least during the daytime, this is a very well defended place.
Well, that's good. That's good. But so okay, now how did we get off topic here? It's probably
We
honey.
we
Honey. The
we
honeybee
took a
is
we took a beeline.
well. No, if you think about it, right now they're telling us that the honeybee is on fragile ground. We may lose all the honeybees, and the beekeepers are sharing that. You know, the bees are actually becoming more susceptible to viruses and bacteria that are killing hives. But are they scarce? Because bees can multiply tremendously.
Well, so anything. This is kind of a biology moment right here. Anything with a short lifespan tends to breed in high numbers,
Right.
and so ultimately the whole system is designed to be able to replace itself fairly quickly.
Well, absolutely.
Which which whenever you're in a restaurant, you can order mahi mahi or dorado,
Yeah, I was
as
gonna
it's
say.
called, because it only lives to be 4 years old anyway, and it's a really quick turnover fish, a lot like tuna. So a rockfish in California, a big enough one to eat, maybe 25 years old, and so that's why for those fish you needed to do something, because you could a calico bass, you could fish those out by taking all the big ones and interrupting the breeding cycle, because it took them so many years to get back into it. But there are some fish like tuna, mahi mahi, that are quick turnaround fish, and yeah, just scarf them down. Protein.
They are. What's it? It's not, the other dolphin. Mahi mahi wasn't another name for a dolphin, was it?
Yeah, dolphin fish. If
Yeah,
East Coast is dolphin fish, Hawaii is mahi mahi, West Coast is dorado,
Dorado. But they all
and
taste the same.
it is the same species of fish. It's a global fish. So when we talk about scarcity bias, it's like somebody in sales, somebody in government, somebody in all the major things where they're trying to influence human behavior figured this out and plugged it in. And so a lot of what prompts us to buy, you know, I don't know if you go on any of these major buying sites now, but a lot of them have like little thing at the bottom that says selling out quickly. There's only 10 left.
You need to stay off that Timu site, Scott.
No, no, no. I've got Timu figured out. You fill up your cart full of crap, and then you don't do anything with it. You leave the cart. You walk away from the cart. Timo starts texting you like they text me more than my kids, and they give you bargain after bargain after bargain, trying to get you to deal with this cart. And so I'm right at the point now where Timo's going to start sending me checks to take their merchandise.
They may have to.
They're
To,
like, it's down to 1 cent now on several items, and
to
you know
avoid the tariff. And that's one way to avoid the tariffs. Don't charge anything.
you're right, right there it is. I will see what that does. Um, I heard from one of my friends at the dog park, that who has been on county retirement now for like 20 years,
Wow.
and it if you're a county retired person, it hammered your social security. Guess what? She got a letter in the mail from the Social Security Administration. She's getting back pay.
That's good.
So they went and took away that penalty that government employees were getting. That law passed, and now she's like, well, I could pay my car off, which is good for her, because she was really. I mean, I'm paycheck to paycheck. I make a lot more money than she does.
Right.
We spend it on cats,
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And bees.
right? No, the bees eat the hummingbird food in my house, so they do get a contribution.
Okay.
So scarcity bias. This is interesting because not only is it consumerism, but to me, I thought, well, what about the cardinal virtues? What about prudence, justice, fortitude, temperance? Those are the four cardinal virtues. If those appear to be in short supply, and that's just a couple of crap posts on social media, and all of a sudden everybody's going to think that we're in dark world or whatever. Then all of a sudden we start hoarding those, so we don't share. So we're not prudent. We're not just to our. I'm not a court. I'm not a judge. I'm not a cop. But I could take my neighbor's trash in
Right.
and not let the wind blow it over. And that's kind of a justice thing. That's kind of doing the right thing, at the time. Fortitude. It's now that I've got shots of stuff that will take my weight down, why should I worry about what I eat? Why should I worry about exercise? I've got a chemical that will do the same thing. The only thing that's going to be in short supply is my money.
Well, you may get some long-term effects of the steroids, but other than that,
No, it's Gila monster. Hey, Arizona person, it's Gila monster venom. Who knew that was going to be the weight loss sensation of the century?
well, that's why it's so expensive. There's really not an overabundance of Gila monsters out there.
No, well, they figured out how to manufacture it, so they don't have to a bunch of Gila monsters getting milked every week anymore. But there you go. It's kind of an interesting little way that they got to that weight loss stuff, and it works. And you see a lot of people in public now who were bigger people, and that they're not bragging about it, obviously, but you can tell that they've had access to it because they're looking. Us people of age, we have to choose between our faces and our butts. So the minute we get a cute butt, our face is just all hanging and saggy because we're not carrying the weight we were supposed to be carrying.
Wow.
So
Wow, you
there it is.
you studied this.
When you're coming into the field, when you're walking through that door, you better know what's happening.
Poor Gila monster.
Right. Right. So these virtues, we become less virtuous because we're holding on to it, because we think it's scarce and we don't want to share it. And then you talk about things like love and kindness. It's like if you start feeling like the world isn't a loving place, that doesn't make you more loving. That makes you guarded. That makes you much more conscious of you having it's like gold. I'm not going to give it away. And I think that's something that ultimately, I started with cats not sleeping in their beds. But I think the more important point is that if we start getting the perception, again, as you said, maybe not a fact for sure, that things are scarce, and these are good things that make us human, that make us better people, and we start limiting, we start hoarding and settling and over consuming, then we're not doing ourselves any favor, and we're not doing our community any favor. It's like we should be holding doors for everybody.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And but there's so many factors in that, Scott. I mean, through the course of my life, my ability to love has changed dramatically, and will probably continue to change.
Are you cuddly now?
Not cuddly, but I'm more appreciative, and I think I'm easier to love. It's easier for me to love people and things and just appreciate nature that I was oblivious to when I was young.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, a lot of that's biochemical. I would dare say.
Okay.
When guys are walking around all jacked on hormones, there's a lot of stuff we miss.
Yeah. Well, that's true. That's true.
And stuff starts to fade a little bit, and they go, "Oh, look, the birds are singing. Who knew?"
Yeah. Crickets, they're nice now. Yeah.
Right? Well, you could actually tell the temperature with crickets. This actually does work.
No, it doesn't, Scott, because that cricket back east chirps about the same rate as the one in the desert when it's 110 degrees outside. But you believe it. You believe it, so I'm not going to take that away from you.
I do. I'm out there counting cricket chirps.
And they're all they're all chirping in the same pattern in
Well,
harmony.
no, it has to do with how their fluid in their body uh, works in exchange with the temperature. So if it's colder, their fluid's a little bit more viscous, and they can't chirp as quickly. I mean, it's not like a huge difference, but there's something there.
Yeah, and somebody put the energy into trying to develop a paper via to justify the grant that they received from sharing that information with the world.
You know,
And you bought into it. And you bought into it. They said it was important, Scott, and you
it's
validated it.
funny because I'm actually one of those people who has read more than 100 dissertations, and I almost never go back and critique their dissertations because I'm like, this person cared enough about this topic to write 250 pages on it. I'm going to just let them go.
And see, I'm the person that reads it and goes, my gosh, they paid for an education where their advisor allowed them to write this dissertation. Said it's a
Oh
good
yeah,
idea.
well, does the world change? I mean, that's kind of why I haven't written any books in a little while. I'm like, I was writing with the intent of the world responding to my writing, and, and at the end of the day, I don't think you get a lot of that. You get like really small pieces of it. It's like the starfish story. It's like the beach is full of dying starfish, and the little kid is throwing starfish back, and the old man comes up and he says, "That's a waste of time. What are you doing? All these starfish are going to die. There's no way you're going to be able to throw all these back." And the little kid says, "Well, it mattered to this one," which
Right,
is true.
which is true. But, you
But
know,
but that doesn't get me to pick up a pen.
no, but, your writing was serving, it was keeping you out of therapy because it was cathartic, I'm sure.
It is, and even though I still write paragraphs, I don't put them all together and make stories out of it anymore. But um, and maybe I will someday again if I get bored enough. But I think I'd probably take up fishing first.
You were a fisherman. Once a fisherman, always a fisherman. And you should write about the dog park because you come away from there with some interesting perspective.
You know what? The it would be like a Netflix series because you've got all these kind of unique personalities that come in unique, that come in interesting. They're their own storylines, and then they intersect with each other. They talk to each other. They bump into each other, and you get just this unique kind of, and it doesn't happen online. It's you don't see this happening in your friends, on whatever platform that you want, because they're your friends, and they're all thinking more or less the same thing you are. It's really hard to have people who disagree with you on those platforms, and then you don't ever get to sort stuff out with them. They yell their stuff, you yell your stuff, and then eventually one of you gets bored and moves on.
Well, you should actually put that show together, Scott. And Caesar Milan can be your co-host because
You know what? He was pretty good. The kid's got some talent. I learned some stuff from Caesar.
I implement things I learned from Caesar with the cat.
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure.
So he was gifted. But the dog park would be fascinating. People would love the dogs, the characters. It's a good idea.
And there's some interesting themes floating around. I like my favorite theme at the dog park are the people who want their dogs to be well behaved, and so they're really authoritative with and strict with their like expectations, like sit Fido sit. Stay, Fido, stay. And there are people like, I took my dog to the dog park to be a dog. And these
Well,
dogs are digging holes or running around raising hell. And most of the people at the dog park are like, yeah, it's cool. It's a dog.
this is where the dogs come to congregate. Yeah.
Right. And just be dogs and not live under kind of structure and rules. So it's interesting.
Well, if I were a visitor to the dog park and I spent a couple hours there and I got through the day without a dog biting or peeing on me, I would consider it successful.
You know what? Knock on wood. I have neither of those have happened to me yet. I have seen people get nipped, and I think I saw somebody get peed on once. But ultimately, I'm the Artful Dodger,
You're not,
and
you're not,
I've broken up some dog fights too. But like you, I'm not 6'7", but I'm 6'2", and so I've got the means.
well, yeah, but you still have to be careful. But
You do have
those
to be careful.
those dogs need to want to stop fighting, which deep down they do.
Deep down, they do. They just need a boss to come in and say, "Hey,
It,
stop."
it's okay to quit fighting. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, although it's not one of those kind of quiet negotiations. It's like you have to out yell the yelling dogs because they're already yelling at each other.
Well, people ask me, "Do you talk to your cat?" I say, "Absolutely." What do you say to him? A lot. I tell him to be good because when he interacts with another animal, I want him to be good, and he understands. Those are trigger words for him.
Nice, nice. I appreciate that. I'm always telling my one dog that the cats are good cats because she gets worried about the cat's weapons.
Yeah, yeah, and they're formidable.
Hmm. Hmm.
You brought up triggers earlier. Just did a show on triggers, and they were very. It was interesting perspectives, and I was actually complimenting my co-host on in his mature aspect to life. He'd learned how to deal with them. I mean, we're all affected by triggers, but for some of us that we get older, it's not the sky doesn't necessarily need to be falling, and we just put it in its category and put it away, and we get back to what we were doing. For others,
Well,
that's not
and
the case.
triggers could be. You could look at triggers through the filter of scarcity bias.
Yeah,
Your
absolutely.
peace of mind is an important commodity, and if you feel like something's threatening that, it's getting your peace of mind is getting scarce. Then you're not going to waste it in that situation, and B, you're going to kind of protect it. And there you go. Now you're triggered.
Well, absolutely, and you know, this pandemic we went through, there was a lot of smoke and mirrors, and there was a lot of scarcity, and there was a lot of they were trying to trigger us to action, and it had the triggers that they put in the float of the game were dividing the country.
Oh, absolutely. It's what do you do, and do you have to do it? And there was a lot of unknowns,
Right, right.
right?
But in fact,
But the
it's
one thing I do know is in our community, we were making phone calls over the state trying to get refrigerated trucks to hold the bodies of
yeah,
decedents.
yeah.
And so obviously there was some danger involved with the disorder.
Oh, certainly, or how it was being handled, and it's just the coping with triggers but scarcity came to play there as well, and in moving people to action. But you're right, triggers play such a role in all of that, from hoarding toilet paper to complaining about the price of eggs and all those things.
Where would I put scarcity in COVID? You had scarcity of relationships because we're all in lockdown.
You had
You had
emotions.
you had some people freaking out because they felt like they were having scarcity of oxygen wearing a mask. You had other people again getting stuff was a problem, and it wasn't just toilet paper. There were lots of things. The cupboards were bare, and so you had lots of ways where that was playing out, and it was playing out over and the other scarcity bias is, you know, I may catch this and I may die, or I may catch this and pass this to my health impaired person that I live with, and they may die. And so now you've got kind of existential scarcity,
Well,
and that can freak people out and trigger people as well.
well, scarcity of well-being. I mean, people were, there was a fear in the land.
Well, and there's still some kiddos running around with long COVID. I mean, so their concerns were well founded. They still can't stand up without a racing heart, or get their breath or whatever.
Yeah, yeah, but we're all susceptible to that every day, whether it's certain strains of pneumonia or just
I was
uh,
saving myself for RSV.
there you
Like
go. There you go. Well, that's good. I always just used to say this: none of this could deal with the hantavirus that I'm a carrier for, and then lo and behold, now James Caan's wife died of hantavirus.
yes, yeah, Gene Hackman, Gene
Gene
Hackman's
Hackman,
wife.
yeah, yeah, Gene
Well,
Hackman's wife.
and of course it was an Arizona thing, Mister Arizona,
No, it was New Mexico.
New Mexico. Well, that's kind of like Arizona East, isn't it?
Well, no, but it's a major that part of New Mexico and Colorado in that area. Hantavirus is common. It's in
Yes,
existence in the rodents.
yes.
And when they got to the bottom of hantavirus, they discovered what it was because there were like 61 Marines died in Korea during the Korean War, and it never got classified as hantavirus, but it was the same virus that killed them.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. If you catch it, it's game on.
It is. It is. And they really haven't come up with you'll either survive or you won't, and they really have not come up with a good regiment of things that are going to help you if they can get it diagnosed before you die, because it just looks viral.
Yeah, yeah. Very, very much worth. And then again, you get, is my life scarce? You know,
It's
do I have to be like super hyped up and super worrying about keeping myself safe because this limited commodity I have called my existence
right.
is going to be snatched or stolen from me by some scary virus or some world disaster or whatever.
Or old age or whatever that is, but I think we all come to realize that it's precious and it's fleeting. Our lives are fleeting.
But there's an abundance. Ultimately, if you think of your life as a moment and go moment to moment, then it's unlimited, right? And there's
Right.
lots of love, there's lots of kindness, there's lots of this. But if you think of your life as kind of like the baseball innings, and you're looking at your age and going, well, I'm in the bottom of the eighth here.
We need to get our rally caps on.
You're hoping for a tie game so you get extra innings.
But it is there is a scarcity to it, and there is a preciousness to life, and it's something we all deal with, and in so many different ways.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, NFL free agency. There were only a couple good cornerbacks on the market. They got well paid.
Well, yeah, but it's just like whoever coined the phrase "celebration of life." They were geniuses because that's helped so many people. It's helped so many people deal with that time in their lives.
Yeah, I think, and I think that that's the circle summary of what we're talking about today. Is that you really have to sit with: do I need to be triggered by this scarcity? Is it, first of all, is it real, right? Or are they just holding the rest of them in the back room, waiting for me to buy eight of them? You know, or can I accept and locate abundance in my life, and then I can just relax about the scarcity and not worry as much about things that may be out of my control, because some things may naturally be scarce.
Yes.
You know, hantavirus can sneak up and get you. It's not like you have to deliberately try to catch that one. Just walk into a room with a little dust.
Well, you know, I've only been bitten by a brown recluse spider once, but I live with them. I've got them in my office.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But And Scott, we should do an episode on triggers because I
Let's do
believe
that.
you have some coping skills for us. That,
I was gonna say, you believe I have some triggers, huh? That's triggering. Just you saying that.
yeah, but see how quickly you've coped.
What I try to do is I definitely try to laugh at myself.
Yes, absolutely.
Because why not? Because our triggers are so contextually based, right? It was like, what TV shows did you watch growing up? What were your dinner time conversations about? Did you go to church, and was your God angry about certain things? And so it's like all of those things contribute to each of us
Right.
to give us trigger, and some of the triggers may be life saving. That's kind of the interesting part about triggers to me, is that sometimes that arousal, the light just turned red. I'm going to try and stop. you know, that could save your life. And
Right.
that's a trigger. There's a little bit of a jolt of adrenaline. There's a little bit of a jolt of reaction. There's a little bit of, oh my God. And it worked. But many times it's just fluff.
Oh, absolutely. We've been sold a bill of goods.
All right. So we're teasing next week's show. Next week we'll do more triggers than Mr. Ed
Well, speaking of triggers and the Lone Ranger,
or Roy Rogers. Roy
Roy
Rogers.
Rogers. Yeah, not yeah, okay. Roy Rogers. Yeah, and Dale Evans and Trigger stuffed somewhere in California that I don't know quite where it is.
I've got Roy Rogers' autograph on a Detroit Tigers baseball program from the early '70s. He was the owner of the Angels for a while,
No, that
and,
was
and he
Gene
was.
Autry.
Oh, then I got Gene's autograph.
Gene and Champion. Yeah, I remember I was a little kid at the Nebraska State Fair Auditorium watching Gene Autry ride in on Champion. And he rode in on Champion, and Champion reared, and Gene Autry fell on the ground. And my
Oops.
dad covered my eyes. I must have been 6. Then later was told Gene was drunk.
Nice. Now, so Gene should have named his horse Trigger, and Roy should have named his Champion, and then we could have sorted this all out on a kind of more upbeat level.
I think Gene should have named it Scotch.
There you go.
There you go. All right, Scott. This was an interesting topic. I don't know that I helped you do it justice, but
But
there's
you're going to
that.
go check your cupboards right now to make sure you've got
No, no, I'm going
proper
to be all
conduct.
right. You know, that false sense of scarcity. That's an interesting perspective.
Yep, yep. It's just something, just one of those things to be, and you need to be aware of it because it's one of those things that is deliberately rolled down to you. People try to get you into that aroused state, into that triggered state of, something's, you better get it now or you'll never be able to get it again.
Yeah, and show up next week and we're going to talk about those rat bastards that are triggering us to where we don't need to be triggered.
That's going to be a fun one because we can go all over the map on that, and I can't wait.
All right. Okay, Scott. Thank you, sir. Everybody, thanks for joining us. This has been Justin Case and Scott bringing you American Consciousness. Thanks for joining us. Remember, additional information and links provided in this video is read more. Today is the day to subscribe to this channel. Please learn more about Scott when time permits.